Hey, I'm Jake. I make RPG supplements and videos about Pathfinder 2, or PF2. I love PF2, and as a longtime player of D&D, I want to share the things that I find along the way, and share them with you in a way that makes them easy to digest, and hopefully fun. Today I'll be going over the Geomancer Archetype with pros and cons, and giving you a few ideas on how you could use it. I want to say first, I apologize for the sound quality. My microphone broke. So this is what we gotta deal with until I get a new one. If you want to follow along, either open up Secrets of Magic to page 212, or open Archives of Nethys to the Geomancer Archetype page. The link is in the description of this video. Down there. Geomancy has themes, which I won't be covering here. Short version, they're like scenery or elemental themed, like aquatic. You link your magic to your surrounding environment, empowering your spells with the world around you. This ability is called Terrain Attunement. This archetype is all about it. At level 2, the Geomancer Dedication requires trained in nature, and you have to be able to cast spells from spell slots and at least one spell with one of the following descriptors: air, cold, earth, fire, plant, or water. So like elements and plant. Yeah, I guess. And cold. Whatever. Whenever you cast a spell from a spell slot that has a trait that matches the terrain you're currently in, you gain a bonus effect. This can be something helpful to you or harmful to your enemies. So like it's snowing and you cast a cold spell, you get a bonus effect based on cold. Unless otherwise stated, the effect lasts until you're no longer in that terrain or until the GM says. I've heard people saying that if it's a combat ability, it should last for about a minute, and if it's out of combat, it should last 10 minutes or an hour, depending on what seems appropriate. I would just go with the first idea, that it lasts for as long as you're in the terrain, cause that's simpler. The options for the bonus effects are as follows. In aquatic terrain with water trait spells, you gain a swim speed equal to your land speed, or if you're on a solid surface in an aquatic environment, like you're on a boat. Then, fleeting water waves appear and move with you, so you can use your swim speed as your land speed, just like little waves pushing your feet. Let's go. Arctic or cold. Enemies attempt a fortitude save. They take a minus 5-foot speed penalty for 2 rounds, or minus 10 on a crit fail. Desert or fire. Enemies attempt a fortitude save. On a failed save, they're fatigued until they drink water or another potable liquid. Fatigued gives them a minus 1 status penalty to AC and saves. This is great, because they're either going to spend actions drinking and pulling out a flask to drink from, or they're just easier to hurt for the rest of the fight. You win either way. This is probably the most directly powerful ability out of all of the elemental or traits. Elemental or terrain traits. Forest. Plant trait spells. Enemies attempt a reflex save. If they fail, they're clumsy 1 for 1 round, and clumsy 2 on a crit fail for the same 1 round. Clumsy gives a penalty on anything related to dex, like AC, reflex saves, range attacks, and skills using acrobatics, stealth, or thievery. Mountain terrain or earth trait spells. For 1 round, you get resistance to physical damage, except adamantine, equal to the spell level. It can be somewhat useful, especially if you have steady spellcasting, or you're getting hit with ranged attacks. Because hopefully if you don't have steady spellcasting, you're not casting right next to somebody who can smack you and make you lose your spell. Plains, also plant trait. Gain temporary hit points equal to the spell level for 1 round. Always moderately useful. Sky terrain, air trait spells. You fly up to 10 feet. At the end of that time, you fall if you didn't have a fly speed, but if you're in an air terrain, you're probably already flying. So this just helps with positioning, like making your enemies spend more actions to get to you or getting closer to an ally, like for them to protect you or to heal them or something. Swamp terrain, plant trait spells. Enemies attempt a fortitude save. On a fail, they take persistent poison damage equal to half the spell's level, minimum 1. Yeah, it's not great. And it wouldn't stack with other persistent poison damage because of how persistent damage works. So it's really just like a little perk to your spell. Like, may as well. Although at low levels, it can actually be very useful. Because, like, how many hit points does a goblin have? Not that many. Underground terrain, earth trait spells. You gain dark vision and imprecise tremor sense out to 15 feet. For 1 round. Yeah. Kinda a stinker, except in certain situations. Overall, if you're in a place that could count as multiple terrains, or you cast a spell that has multiple traits that could be applied, only one terrain attunement effect can be chosen at a time. This archetype has the most flexibility if you have the primal spell list, because there are more spells with these traits on the primal list than the arcane list. Doesn't mean you have to be a druid, but there is also some later synergy with druid as well, so we'll get to that. Level 4 Geomancer offers 2 feats. One is Shared Attunement, which allows you to give one of the beneficial effects that would help you to an ally instead, like the temporary hit points. Yeah, it's useful, team environment. But the other option at level 4 is the best ability they have, which allows Geomancers to have a huge amount of flexibility. Attunement Shift. Once per 10 minutes, as a free action, if your previous action was to cast a spell with one of the terrain traits that I just went through, you can change your current attunement to that of the spell you cast. Your attunement shift lasts for a minute. Now, bear in mind that this is triggered off of casting any spell with one of the terrain traits, not just those from your spell slots, like the terrain attunement benefit. So you can cast a cantrip, like Produce Flame, and change your attunement to Desert, and it sets you up to cast like a Fatiguing Fireball, or Fatiguing Burning Hands. It's a great feat. Level 6 feat is Rough Terrain Stance. Requires Expert in Nature. If you've gained a terrain attunement benefit this turn, you can spend 1 action to enter a stance that makes every adjacent square around you act as difficult terrain, matching the terrain attunement you just gained. Like there's ice on the ground, or undergrowth appears, or there's just piles of sand for like desert attunement. Ew, desert. You ignore this terrain, and it moves with you. The stance ends if you move into a different type of terrain. But then you can just activate it again with an action if you want to, so. I really like the idea of taking this archetype as a druid, or anyone who can turn into an animal combat form, because you can use this ability in animal form after you cast a spell with a long duration, so that if you run up to attack bad guys, they have a hard time getting away from you. Druid tank. Level 8 Attuned Stride. Requires Expert in Nature. When you gain a terrain attunement benefit, you ignore difficult terrain in the corresponding type of terrain until the end of your next turn. Like you're walking through deep snow, and you cast a cold spell from a spell slot. Then you ignore the slow movement from the deep snow for 1 turn. Probably won't come up that much, but it could. And this archetype is nothing if not flexible, so you have a lot of oh shit buttons to push. Level 10 Draw from the Land. Requires Expert in Nature. If you gained a terrain attunement benefit this turn that matches the terrain you're in, you can spend an action to gain temporary hit points equal to your level that lasts for 1 round. If you also gained the Plains terrain attunement effect this turn, you combine the temporary hit points. So it's a nice little buff. And there's no limit on how often you can do this. As long as you keep casting spells from spell slots that match the terrain you're in, you can just keep gaining an extra 10 or more temporary hit points every round. This archetype has some interesting possibilities for a tanky character. Like I see a Magus, or maybe a fighter or thaumaturge or even champion with the druid multiclass archetype. Taking Geomancer and using attack of opportunity along with rough terrain stance and draw from the land to keep the enemy on them and keeping themselves alive with bonus temporary hit points every round. I guess Magus would actually work best in this situation because they have attack of opportunity, and also they have more spells than a druid multiclass would give anybody else. And they can combine the spell into an attack, so they're making really good use of their actions. Level 12, Read the Land. Requires Master in Nature. You learn the ritual Commune with Nature, and can cast it in 1 hour instead of a day, which is a big deal. And you don't need a secondary caster. This lets you ask up to 7 questions about animals, beasts, fae, fungi, plants, topography, and natural resources within a 3-mile radius of the ritual's location. You get one-word answers like yes, no, likely, and unknown. As long as you have a GM who's trying to work with you as a team, this is a freaking amazing spell and can save your lives in the right situation. Or the GM could even throw in a side quest or hidden treasure. I know I did this. I had a player use this ability and asked whether there was a large amount of gold nearby. And it was a certain amount, I forget what it was. And kept using questions to narrow down where it was. He found it. It was an Aurum Vorax that had been stalking the party. It's a creature that eats metal, especially gold. And its fur and bones are dense with gold ore. So they got to know that it had been following them. That was fun. I was totally wondering when I could throw that in, and as soon as Thomas said he cast that spell, it was my perfect opportunity. I'm like, oh, it's right behind you. Level 14. It did give him a benefit still. Like, he got to get an extra round of combat. It was a different version of D&D we were playing. Anyway, level 14, Shifting Terrain. Requires both Rough Terrain Stance and Master in Nature. If your terrain attunement matches the terrain you're in, and you're in Rough Terrain Stance, you spend an action to slam your fist into the ground, or twirl your arms, to make your rough terrain area around your aura, I guess, shift, ripple, and possibly make your enemies clumsy, so like they get disoriented. Each enemy in the area of your rough terrain from the stance has to make a reflex save. If they succeed, they're clumsy 1 for 1 round. Fail, clumsy 2. Critical fail, and they're clumsy 2 for 1 round, and they fall prone. This is amazing. Remember our Magus friend? Yeah, 1 action to potentially knock prone all enemies in melee combat with you? Hell yes. Level 14, Terrain Shield. Requires Master in Nature. Once per 10 minutes. If a strike would damage you, and you gained a terrain attunement benefit since the start of your most recent turn that matches the terrain you're in, you gain resistance to physical damage equal to double your level against the triggering strike. A wall of stone shoots up out of the ground and blocks a giant's club, or a huge gust of wind blows your enemy's sword strike away from you. This is great. This is the most awesome ability the Geomancer has. I know I said the level 4 is great, but they're both, like, awesome in their own rights. And powerful. Again, this works great for a melee fighter type, but it will save your life no matter what class you are. It is simply awesome. Level 16 feat. Quickened Attunement. Requires Legendary in Nature. Once per day, if your previous action was an Attunement Shift, the level 4 ability, you can reduce the number of actions to cast your next spell by 1 action to a minimum of 1 action. It doesn't stack with Quickened Casting. It's basically the same thing as Quickened Casting. So you could have ended your last turn with Attunement Shift, and then on this turn use Quickened Attunement and cast 2 2-action spells this turn. And you just used Attunement Shift, so you can choose any terrain attunement benefit. Like, you can cast 2 Petal Storms that they have the plant trait. It causes slashing damage in 2 huge areas, and you also give 2 allies extra temporary hit points for that round. It's useful and flexible. Obviously, Geomancer opens up a huge number of options for battlefield control. I'm totally thinking of a fun Megas build for the Geomancer after this, obviously. Thank you for coming. If you liked the video, giving it a thumbs up will help boost its visibility in the algorithm, so YouTube will know that there's good content here. And feel free to leave a comment if I missed something, or if you have a specific archetype you'd like to see. I will be happy to oblige. Thank you to our lovely patron people. Patrons get access to unique videos and giveaways. They also have a private chat and other perks. If you'd like to see the benefits, click on the Patreon link in the description. Our website has build walkthroughs and starter characters on PDFs that you can download, link in the description. If you want to make sure to catch the next video I make, Hitting the subscribe button is a good way to bookmark the page so you can remember to check back later and see what I've done. If you'd like to see other archetype videos, you can click here, or other build videos here. And remember, if you sneeze traveling 60 miles per hour, your eyes are closed for an average of 50 feet. Be careful out there.